Here we are at the end of 2025, difference makers. I hope that if you celebrated Christmas, if that's a holiday that you celebrate, that wherever you are in the world, you had a wonderful, lovely, either cold or warm time with your family and friends, depending on if you're in the northern or the southern hemisphere. I don't know if you have a beachy holiday in Australia or if you're up in some cozy cabin somewhere in Canada. Wherever you are, I hope that has been an incredible time of just refreshment and gifts and shared meals and time with loved ones. And as we close out this year, I wanted to revisit some, but not all of the books that I've read this year. I read a lot. As you know, many of you are also bookworms yourself, and I pretty much read nonfiction. I love reading books about work, business, thought leadership. And one of my favorite things about being a podcast host is many publishers will send me books, advanced copies of books to see if those are a fit for the podcast. Many times they aren't. They aren't always. But regardless, I love reading them. And several authors have been on the podcast this year, as every other year. We don't exclusively interview authors or writers, but many of the difference makers that have been on as guests have written books, and I have enjoyed reading every single word of the books that I've been sent and of the ones who've made it on the podcast and some that might be coming in 2026. So there's a little preview at the end if you want to stick around for that. But I just wanted to revisit some of the books that really resonated with both me and you this year as far as the guests. You really resonated with this book, AI for the Authentic Leader, How to Communicate More Effectively Without Losing Your Humanity, with Allison Shapira, who's a lecturer at Harvard. Some of the things in that interview were so impactful for me. And, you know, I always love it when authors write a little note in the book. And she wrote a little personal note for me that says, Lori, the world needs your authentic voice. And isn't that what we talk about here in the podcast? That is my why. I believe that those of you out there in the world, wherever you live, that your voice matters. You matter. You are bringing differences around the table to make a difference. And your differentiator is what sets you apart. So whether you're in a job search right now, or you're sitting on a board, or you're in your community trying to do work that makes the world a better place of any shape and form across industries, this podcast is a reminder to you as you listen to the different guests that come on the show that your different perspective is so, so needed. And in the era of AI specifically, there's so much foundation being laid right now in this time. This year was a game changer with AI. And not only because I sit here in Silicon Valley where a lot of it is being created, but also as we see it transforming work, now is the time to early on get as many voices around the table as possible, and to early and often keep those voices speaking into how it's being created. Because you know that if you're working in designing buildings, which, you know, having lived in Singapore, I always marvel at the architecture of Marina Bay Sands, and being here in San Francisco Bay Area, the Transamerica building, the Salesforce Tower, all these architectural feats. If you don't lay the foundation correctly, the structure itself ends up not being sound. It's not stable. So as we're laying the foundation of AI and the work is being transformed, all the more reason we want early and often to have different perspectives around the table, because we're seeing in the era of this transformation where we see some blind spots, we see some echo chambers and issues around adoption, early adoption, and people being resistant to adopt certain change management initiatives around AI. Some of it really can just be brought back to the fact that those voices weren't brought to the table early and often, because there's so much we don't see. And hopefully in this podcast, we're teaching each other how to eliminate those blind spots and the risk management of that by just listening to one another. I always love it when authors leave me or have little cards in there for me. And it's just that special little touch that makes this podcast feel more personal to me as a podcast host, but also when I get to read the words of an author ahead of time as I prepare for their interview, I feel like I'm getting to know them. It's a really special thing to be invited in to read someone's book and interview them about it. Many of you also resonated with Gary Ridge. He was incredible. I really loved interviewing him. His book, used to be the CEO of WD-40, which is no small company. And as the chairman emeritus of it, he wrote this book called Any Dumbass Can Do It, along with Martha Finney. And there's a foreword by Ken Blanchard. Many of you know him, situational leadership guy, which many of you, including me, have used in multiple workplaces. It's an incredible tool if you aren't familiar with it. But his whole book, about the subtitle is Learning Moments from an Everyday CEO of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Company. And I just really enjoyed not only reading from his Australian perspective, his perspective of traveling to places like Fiji, but also in the interview itself, just how human-centered he is as a leader and how he really cared so much about leading in a way that really helped increase engagement and build retention, and address the issues of any attrition, and just the highly rated company that it is as a result. Many of you also resonated with Courage Over Fear by Kristen Kavanagh and Mike Randolph, who were on the show. They used to work at Tesla. And they wrote this book about how to, the subtitle is Harness the Power of Agency to Lead in Uncertain Times. And who knew this book was going to come out in a year of such capitulation in workplaces and in political environments here in the United States, but in other countries as well. I also really loved this book and really enjoyed interviewing Catherine Matisse on Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies. This is another book by Wiley Press. We've had several Wiley authors on this year. So much it's a resource that I've gone to again and again to help me as a leader be more human-centered and look for those red flags navigating a toxic workplace. For those who are reaching out to me, sharing your stories with me on the show, who've been in toxic work environments or currently are, and are trying to work through some decisions around that. These are really hard decisions. And let's be clear, it is a privilege to be able to leave a work environment that's toxic because you have support resources that will help you do that. But many of you are in situations where you can't. And so this workbook, this whole book itself, is a resource for you to figure out how to navigate that. But I also want to be clear that if you have the opportunity to leave an environment like that because it's not respecting you or your dignity or your voice or your values, and you are experiencing workplace bullying or toxic behaviors of any kind, let's be very clear. That is very detrimental to your health. And we talk about that in that episode. I hope you'll go back and listen to it. But also, there will be a time for many of us where you have to make a choice, where there's a values misalignment, where things are just not right. And I've had to make a couple of those decisions for myself this year to step away from environments that had changed when I saw the values becoming what they were. And those are hard decisions. But I want to be a reminder to you at the end of the year, as many of you are going through your year and figuring out what to stop and start and continue. And I've been going through that process during the month of December since the beginning. And there's some things that I'm freeing up space for myself to do next year because I've stepped away from environments that just weren't right anymore for me to be there. They just were not the space I wanted to give my energy because things had changed. And if you're in a situation where you are feeling as though your voice is diminished, you don't feel psychologically safe, you don't feel respected with dignity, then that workbook itself, this Navigating a Toxic Workplace, might be something for you. It might be Courage Over Fear. Listen to these episodes because I think that they will inspire you to make the decision that you might just need some other voices speaking into you about how to do it and the way to escape that in a way that makes sense for you. And that's what these authors are writing about in various ways. We also had Rachel Radway on talking about her book Perceptive. And here in Silicon Valley, we have a lot of people that are neurodivergent, but it's not exclusive to here. There are many workplaces around the world that have not done a great job of being aware of how people that are more highly sensitive people or more perceptive, how to make the environment one in which they can thrive and flourish. And this book is really insightful. I do hope that if you haven't read it yet, you'll pick it up and listen to that episode with her. Incidentally, I was introduced to her through Minette Norman, who I met at Alley to Valley this year in Palo Alto. And after Minette and I met, we just realized we needed to do a podcast together. And so I invited her on. She's written this book. It's a psychological safety playbook, Lead More Powerfully, Be More Human. It just turns out, you've heard me say this a million times, not only is psychological safety the key to successful teams, according to Google's Project Aristotle, but it just turns out thriving workplaces are built on this cultivation of psychological safety. It's more than a feeling. It's in your policies, procedures, behaviors, and not just values on a wall, which also brings it to her other book that she spoke about here, Minette's book, The Boldly Inclusive Leader. It really is how to transform your workplace and the world by valuing the differences within. And she spoke about both of these books, and go check out her podcast again. I got to go in person to the book launch for Amira Barger, who was on the podcast, and we have become friends. We've done a walk together at the Embarcadero since then. She wrote this book, The Price of Nice: Why Comfort Keeps Us Stuck and Four Actions for Real Change. And she's just an incredible human being. Her voice is a reminder that seeing something and saying something about it really matters for risk management in our workplaces and in our communities. Being kind is not the same as being nice. And I got to go to the Chief Clubhouse in San Francisco for her book launch and meet her friends and her coworkers and her family members, her husband and her daughter, and the publishers of this book, who are just also incredible people. And there's going to be some other episodes coming up next year from authors of this publishing house. And it was just an incredible night of connection because Amira is just somebody that you want to follow. Her writing, her voice is really making a difference because she's reminding you that your voice matters and that you don't have to shrink yourself or stay small when your perspective really could make a huge difference or even a small difference in a meeting or around a table in a workplace or in a community or a family. So if you've not read this book, it's incredible. She's such a good writer and she's just an all-around wonderful human being. It turns out I found out at the book launch that she's a missionary kid too. And hello, we had the missionary kids author on the podcast and many of you resonated with her work. Holly Berkeley Fletcher not only was a missionary kid raised in Kenya and went to boarding school there, but she also was a CIA analyst. So it's just an incredible book of somebody who has that sort of mind and a historian as well. And I got to hear her speak at Stanford along with a couple of other historians and go out to dinner with a bunch of this Stanford history department professors. And it was just an incredible night of a wonderful dinner where I made new friends as well. But it's just the kind of people around Holly are just awesome people. And her book, I just read every single word, even in the acknowledgments at the end where she talks about her dog. It's just such a well-written book. And many of you who are missionary kids or former missionaries yourselves, or just people who have been involved in faith spaces, work in CIA environments as expats overseas, many of you relate to this book because maybe you were in international school with missionary kids or you were one yourself. It's just a part of the expat work experience, which is so many different industries out there across the world. So another person that became a friend this year because she came on the podcast after I was given a link to a copy of her book, Navigate Your Career. Dr. Shweta Miglani is incredible. We've had Indian food together at one of my favorite places here in Silicon Valley, done work-related things together. She's become a dear friend. We're going to be doing more together in 2026. Look out in January for a LinkedIn Live with us together. And her book not only has just really resonated with so many people, she has the experience and the background and the knowledge to help people be successful in new roles and promotions. What do those first 90 days look like? I know a lot of you are looking for work right now. And as you're starting to prepare for those first 90 days, once you do land that incredible job in 2026, please pick up her book. Even as you're navigating what to do next, she helps you walk through the choices that you might have in front of you. Do you want to pivot your career and do something completely different? If you're facing 2 and 3 opportunities at the moment, which one is best for you career-wise? She walks through a lot of that. And these 2 authors that I'm showing you back to back again are also friends. It's fun how to see that authors in the author community, especially with the same publishers, some of them end up being great friends. But through Shweta, I met Lorraine K. Lee, who's incredible. I know many of you have really enjoyed her episode, which has resonated again and again and again with so many of us around her book, Unforgettable Presence. And she did work at LinkedIn years ago. She's an incredible speaker. She's been speaking everywhere. We're also going to be doing stuff together again early next year. So look out for that here in the Bay Area. Her book is about how to get seen, gain influence, and catapult your career. And her tips, please just sign up for her newsletter. Her newsletter is just outstanding. It's one of the best I've ever seen. She's just very practical and gives just the best advice. She's kind of everywhere. She's been interviewed everywhere. And also she's quoted in this book. These women have not been on the podcast, but their publisher sent me this book. It's one of the wildest and greatest books I read this year just because of the topic they're covering, which is called All the Cool Girls Get Fired, How to Let Go of Being Let Go and Come Back on Top. It's by Laura Brown, Christina O'Neill, 2 women that were fired, let go from their companies, and took a selfie together and put it on Instagram and just said, All the Cool Girls Get Fired. And it turned into a book where they've interviewed so many people, women who often don't talk about getting fired, but they tell their story. So they've got Oprah Winfrey, Jamie Lee Curtis, Lisa Kudrow, who's Phoebe on Friends. She got fired from Frasier, and that's how she ended up landing the Friends role because she was available. Carol Burnett, Katie Couric, Tarana Burke, and Mika Brzezinski, all incredible women. And every one of their stories just really impacted me. And we're trying to schedule them early next year for the podcast, but this book was outstanding. Please pick it up and join the community that they're building. This is another book of somebody who's not been on the podcast yet, but she's a friend and she's been traveling the world for her book. It came out early last year and then it suddenly started really resonating. So she's been traveling the world. Employment is Dead: How Disruptive Technologies Are Revolutionizing the Way We Work. Deborah Perry Piscioni, who's my friend, she started Alley to the Valley, and Josh Dreen. And I'm hoping to get her on the podcast next year to talk about everything that's changing in work that we're seeing here in Silicon Valley and worldwide in terms of gig economy, layoffs, all kinds of things happening. This is a book I also read this year. She was not on the podcast, but The Let Them Theory is she's had the #1 podcast last year. I picked it up in the airport in Chicago when I was flying somewhere, and it's just it's an easy plane read in terms of compelling. I didn't want to put it down, and it really made me think about a lot of things. And so I don't know that we'll get Mel Robbins on the podcast this year, but I did want to highlight it as a book that I had read that really made me think about a lot of things. A book that resonated incredibly so with all of you is Becoming the Pastor's Wife. This is a book about work, but work that's unpaid and expected. It's similar to what we see sometimes in politics, where an ambassador will have a spouse that's expected to do certain roles, or a politician will have a spouse that's expected to do everything from decorate the White House to host parties or that kind of thing. So the pastor's wife almost is this 2-for-1 special that Beth Allison Barr, who also was on the podcast when the day she released her previous book called The Making of Biblical Womanhood, how the subjugation of women became gospel truths, where she unpacks some of that. And this year, where work and trad wives and all kinds of things around women in the workplace studies coming out to say, analyzing ambition with women, or women, experiencing a lot of the layoffs this year, questioning whether women should just be at home as trad wives or whether they should be working. All kinds of dynamics. The culture wars around women have really intensified this year. And so this book was just really timely when it comes to analyzing what we expect in our faith communities, our work communities in general. It was just the timing of it all from a historian, Dr. Beth Allison Barr, who's just outstanding. And when I read it, I actually was in London on a work trip, and I visited one of the places that she writes about in the book. Well, go check out that episode and you'll see what I'm talking about. It was just an incredible episode. It resonated with a lot of you. And pretty soon I'll be announcing the best of 2025 episodes, and we'll see if any of these are in that top list that get re-released. I just have in my hands finally one of our best of episodes from a couple years ago. It was from an author, Tia Levings, and I was sent an advance copy of her book, The Well-Trained Wife. And when I read it, it was so well written. In my mind, I thought this is going to be a bestseller. And sure enough, within the first week of releasing A Well-Trained Wife, well after I had interviewed her for the episode and after it released in that first week, it did become a New York Times bestseller, and many of you resonated with that episode. It became one of our best episodes that year, and it continues to resonate with a lot of you. Well, she's been working on her next book, and her publisher just sent it to me. I just a couple days ago got a copy of Tia Levings' new book, and we will be interviewing her for the podcast next year. So in the meantime, I will be reading this cozy by the fireplace on the couch near the Christmas tree. It's called I Belong to Me, A Survivor's Guide to Recovery and Hope After Religious Trauma. Go listen to her first episode with us before the next one gets released next year, and look out for our best of 2025 episodes coming soon. I hope all of you have an incredible new year, that you say goodbye to the old that's not serving you. You welcome in a new year. It's been a year of the snake, where we're shedding off things apparently, and there's all kinds of slithering things happening. But next year is the year of the horse, which we are hoping to gallop into 2026 and have a lot more energy and building momentum going forward. And I think that we're all sort of ready for that. 2025 has been a hard year for a lot of people, work-wise. Women in particular being laid off, people looking for work. The economy's not great here in the United States, and many people are looking for jobs right now. And if that's you, I just want to send you the biggest, warmest hug and say you are somebody that any workplace that gets your voice and gets your perspective will be so lucky to have. And I hope that you find a place where you flourish, that your network comes through for you, that you get introductions, that you get vision. And once again, check out Dr. Shweta Miglani's book, Navigating Your Career, and Lorraine K. Lee's book on presence to help you navigate that LinkedIn and put you out there in a way that authentically shows who you are, in a way that will help you find that next opportunity for yourself. And in the meantime, I hope you're getting some rest from all the work you do, refreshment, rejuvenation with loved ones. It really matters, especially as we say goodbye to this year and welcome the next. Happy New Year to all of you difference makers, and I'll see you in 2026.